Borley Rectory was built by Henry Dawson Ellis Ball.
That's right,
in
1863.
1863, as a home for his wife and 14 children.
It was actually built on the site of a previous rectory, the Herringham Rectory, which was demolished for the purposes of building the new house. And there's evidence that there was a previous building on the site before then, going back to sort of post sort of medieval times.
And this is where the the legend of the monastery that once stood on the site of the rectory, which fueled the story of a monk from Borley Monastery falling in love with a nun from a nunnery at Bures, which is a village 9 miles south of Borley, and they fell in love, discovered, suffered the wrath of their superiors, and the monk was hanged, and the nun walled up alive. Yeah, throughout the story at Borley, apart from the poltergeist phenomena and the footsteps, and it's always been the nun which has seemed to have captured everybody's imagination. But two very famous sightings. The first was in 1900 when the 4 daughters of Reverend Ball, returning from a party in Sudbury, entered the rectory garden, and 3 daughters actually entered the garden and saw a nun-like figure on their lawn. When one of the daughters went to fetch another daughter, it was Elsie.
That's
Elsie,
right.
Elsie
It
Ball,
was Dodie
or Dodie, or one of the Balls. She came out and tried to approach the figure, or did approach it, and it vanished.
One particular incident involving the nun surrounds one Fred Cartwright, a handyman. Cartwright, upon several autumn afternoons, was called in to carry out some repairs upon the rectory. Each time he visited the rectory, however, he sighted a woman who, upon first look, he believed to be ill.
Journeyman carpenter Fred Cartwright.
Fred Cartwright. He was passing by the rectory in the period that it was empty, following the death of Harry Ball, and he was walking along the road past the rectory in order to get to a place where he was working at the time. And on 4 separate occasions he saw the apparition, or he saw a figure standing by the rectory driveway, which he took to be a real person. He thought it was a Roman Catholic Sister of Mercy who was standing by the gate silently, eyes closed.
And he assumed it was. It looked to him like a solid person. On the third morning he passed her, he thought she looked unwell. She looked tired and had her eyes closed. He thought he would ask her if she's okay. But when he turned back, she wasn't there. He assumed that she'd just gone into the rectory grounds, and he carried on to work. It was only on the 4th occasion when he saw her that he decided to speak to her.
That's right.
And he went up to the nun, and one moment she was there, and the next moment she was gone. And he went into the rectory grounds and searched up the garden and the driveway, could find no trace of her, and he went on to work a little bit more puzzled now. It was only when he got back to Sudbury in the evening and to his lodgings that he mentioned that he had seen a nun at Borley, and it was then he was told the legend of the Borley Nun. A chap called John May in 1947 went to the church to do a bit of research on his own. He arrived at 10 at night and sat in the church porch, and he heard, after some time waiting, he heard the gate of the churchyard open and footsteps come along the path and enter the porch. Even though he couldn't see anybody, he saw the door to the church open and then close again, and then soon after he heard the organ playing. But he does recall that there was an overwhelming sense of evil in the porch with him.
Well, basically, before I went to Borley, I'd never had any paranormal experiences before. And I went with this friend of mine who was very much interested in the paranormal and said he'd seen things and heard things, did a lot of research into various sites, like Pluckley, etc. So we drove up there, and I've heard all sorts of bits and pieces on the television and whatnot, and I've heard people saying they felt this and they felt that and they saw this and whatever, headless horseman, etc. You could say I had some healthy scepticism going on. I'd sort of been kind of cajoled into going along on this jaunt, but at the same time I didn't want to be dogmatic or closed-minded. I wanted to allow for the fact that maybe there is something more than the solid everyday sort of reality that we all experience. So we get there and it's coming into twilight, and we decide we're going to go and sit in the porch of Borley Church, because we'd heard that sometimes people have sensed things there and even seen things. So we thought that was a good starting point. And we went and sat down in there, and it's quite damp and cold. And after a while, I am getting a bit bored, I must confess. And then suddenly, it just went really cold. I mean, really cold. And the gloom, it really had got quite dark by that point, and I could sort of sense in that darkness there was something just looking at me. I mean, really, really checking me out somehow. And my hairs went up on the back of my neck, and my heart started beating faster, and I kind of had a cold sweat. And I felt like it was some sort of test, and that if I didn't pass that test, something really bad was going to happen. I mean, I can't say what it was, but I really felt like there was this sort of real feeling of menace and doom.
But do we believe that everything recorded is all true, or could some of it be a hoax?
Now, obviously, I'm not party to every single argument or every single test that's been done or every single experiment. But I know that there is not one paranormal test that's ever stood up under scientific conditions or proper test conditions.
You've got to ask yourself, is all the reports of phenomena, the witness testimonies, the statements, could all of them have been mistakes or fraud or things perceived by people to have a random, a rational explanation? It's absurd. It's some of the evidence was mistaken, some was fake, some was fraud, but a good over 50% of it was not. And given that, you've got to conclude that something did go on at Borley.
I do believe that under genuine testing conditions, these things don't exist. People have said to me, I know, Johnny, that you don't believe these things, and it's not that I don't believe them in the sense I don't find them proved. And I always say, my argument is, on anything like this, that I don't have to prove the existence of something. Because if you can't see it, the argument would be with oxygen, for instance, that, once upon a time you didn't have oxygen. You didn't know it was there. But someone could prove that it was there, so then you go, fantastic, this is what we breathe, but it's obviously you can't see it. But so it's possible that these things could exist. However, I don't see any evidence for it at all.
Do ghosts exist? Can we say that every sighting, feeling and occurrence recorded at Borley was real? That we will never fully know or even be able to prove one way or another. However, through either fact or fiction, the legend of the Borley Nun will remain as ever famous and interesting as it has done for years past.